You never expect to be left out of your own family. The thought doesn't cross your mind, not really. Not until the moment it happens. I'd spent the entire week looking forward to Friday night family dinner, our one ritual that survived the chaos of work, school, and everyone's separate lives. I'd even left the office early, ignoring the pile of emails, just to be home in time to help set the table and maybe, for once, be the first to greet everyone as they came through the door. But when I walked in, the house was quiet, no clatter. From the kitchen, no voices drifting from the living room. I checked my phone, half expecting a message I'd missed, but there was nothing. I set my bag down, the sound echoing in the silence, and tried to shake off the unease. Maybe they were running late. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Then my son, Ethan, appeared in the hallway, phone in hand, face lit up by the blue glow of the screen. He looked up, surprised to see me home so early. "Hey," he said, barely glancing up. "Dinner's off tonight. Mom's got a late meeting, and Sarah's at a friend's. We'll just do something quick later, okay?" I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "All right, thanks for letting me know." He disappeared back into his room, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there for a moment, feeling foolish for having hurried home, for having imagined a night that would never happen. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that these things happened, that I was overreacting, but the emptiness in the house pressed in around me, heavy and unfamiliar. I wandered into the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets without purpose. The fridge was full leftovers from the week, a cake I'd bought for dessert. Just in case, I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table, staring at the empty chairs. I tried to remember the last time we'd all sat together, really sat together. Not just shared a meal, but actually talked, laughed, felt like a family. It had been weeks, maybe months, I couldn't remember. I texted my wife, just a quick hope, "Your meeting goes well," and got a thumbs up emoji in return. I scrolled through my phone, looking for distractions, but nothing held my attention. I felt restless, unsettled, like I was waiting for something that would never come. Eventually, I gave up and went upstairs, telling myself I'd read, maybe, watch something, just pass the time until everyone came home. But the house stayed quiet. Hours slipped by. I heard Ethan leave his room once or twice, the sound of the fridge opening, the microwave beeping. But he didn't come find me. No one did. It was almost 10 when I heard laughter, real laughter. The kind that fills a house, that makes you want to be part of whatever's happening. I sat up, heart pounding, not sure if I'd imagined it. I crept downstairs, drawn by the sound, and stopped at the edge of the dining room. They were all there. My wife, her hair pulled back, laughing at something Sarah said. Sarah, animated, waving her fork in the air. Ethan, eyes bright, grinning, leaning in to hear the punchline of a story. Plates were piled with food, glasses clinked, and the table was set my grandmother's old dishes, the ones we only used for special occasions. For a moment, I just watched. I waited for someone to notice me, to call me over, to make space at the table. But no one looked up, no one saw me standing there. I felt invisible, like a ghost in my own home. I wanted to step forward, to say something, to demand an explanation. But I couldn't move. I stood rooted to the spot, 1,000 questions swirling in my head. Had I done something wrong? Had I missed a message, a conversation, a sign that I wasn't wanted? Or was this just how things were now, everyone moving on, making new rituals, leaving me behind? The laughter grew louder, filling the room, spilling out into the hallway where I stood. I turned away, unable to watch any longer. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last, and closed my bedroom door behind me. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of my family downstairs. I tried to piece together what had happened, to find some logic, some reason, but all I felt was a deep, aching loneliness. I wondered if this was how it started, families drifting apart, not with a fight or a betrayal, but with a quiet, unnoticed absence. I thought about going back down, about forcing myself into the conversation, but the idea felt impossible. I didn't want to be the outsider, the one who had to ask for a seat at the table. I wanted to be missed, to be wanted, to be part of the laughter without having to fight for it. So I stayed where I was, listening to the sounds of the life I used to belong to, and wondered how long it would take before anyone noticed I was gone. The next morning, I moved through the house as if on autopilot, careful not to disturb anyone. The laughter from the night before echoed in my mind, replaying in fragments my wife's easy smile, Sarah's animated gestures, Ethan's grin. I stood in the kitchen, pouring coffee, listening for signs of life. The house felt different, as if I were a guest in a place I used to call home. When Ethan finally emerged, he barely looked at me. "Morning," he mumbled, reaching for cereal. I watched him, searching for some sign that last night had been a misunderstanding, that I'd somehow misread the situation. But he avoided my gaze, focused on his phone, the silence between us thick and unyielding. I wanted to ask why they'd gathered without me, why I'd been left out, but the words caught in my throat. I remembered all the advice I'd read about communication, about how families fall apart not because of one dramatic event, but because of 1,000 small failures to speak, to listen, to understand. I wondered if this was one of those moments, a test of whether I'd let the silence grow, or find the courage to break it. 12. Instead, I cleared my throat. "Did you all have dinner together last night?" I tried to keep my tone light, casual, but Ethan stiffened, his fingers tightening around the cereal box. He shrugged. "Yeah, I guess. Mom got home early. Sarah's friend canceled, so we just ate. I thought you were busy." I swallowed hard. "I was home. I waited upstairs." He glanced at me, then away. "Sorry, I didn't know." The apology felt hollow, more habit than sincerity. I nodded, pretending it was enough, but inside, resentment simmered. I wondered if he even realized what it meant to be excluded, or if to him it was just another night, nothing worth remembering. My wife entered, keys in hand, already dressed for work. She kissed Ethan on the head, smiled at me, and said, "Long day ahead. Can you pick up Sarah from practice?" Her tone was brisk, efficient, as if last night hadn't happened, as if I were imagining the distance between us. "Of course," I replied, forcing a smile. I wanted to ask her about dinner, about why no one thought to calm me down, but the moment passed, and she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume and a trail of unanswered questions. Sarah came downstairs, headphones in, backpack slung over one shoulder. She waved at me, barely pausing before heading out the door. I watched my family scatter, each pulled by their own routines, their own lives, and wondered when I'd stop being part of the rhythm. I spent the day distracted, replaying the scene over and over. Was this the beginning of something worse, or just a blip in the chaos of family life? I remembered stories of people who drifted from their families, not because of anger or betrayal, but because of neglect, of small hurts left unspoken until they became insurmountable. For 5. Was I letting that happen to us? At work, I found myself staring at an empty email draft, tempted to write to my wife, to explain how I felt, but every sentence sounded petty, dramatic, or worse, needy. I closed the laptop, ashamed of my own vulnerability. I was supposed to be the strong one, the steady hand, the parent who held things together. How could I admit that I felt invisible in my own home? That evening, I picked up Sarah from practice. She chatted about her day, her friends, the upcoming game, but never mentioned dinner, never asked why I hadn't joined them. I nodded along, offering encouragement, but my mind was elsewhere, caught between wanting to protect her from my pain and needing her to see me. At home, I found Ethan in the living room, headphones on, lost in his own world. I sat beside him, waiting for him to notice, but he didn't. Finally, I tapped his shoulder. He pulled off the headphones, annoyed. "Can we talk?" I asked. He shrugged. "About what?" "About last night. About us." He rolled his eyes. "It was just dinner." "Dad, don't make it a big deal." I tried to explain, to put into words the ache of being left out, but he was already pulling away, retreating behind sarcasm and indifference. "You're overthinking it," he said, before slipping the headphones back on. I sat there, feeling foolish, wondering if I was making things worse by bringing it up. Maybe he was right, maybe I was overreacting. Maybe families just drift, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Later, After everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chairs. I thought about writing a letter, something honest and raw, a way to say all the things I couldn't say out loud 19, but the words wouldn't come. I was afraid of sounding desperate, of opening wounds that might never heal. I remembered advice about boundaries, about finding your own voice when the family narrative leaves you behind 5. But I didn't want distance, I wanted connection. I wanted to matter. As the night wore on, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could keep pretending, keep swallowing my hurt, or I could risk everything by telling the truth, even if it made things uncomfortable. I wasn't sure which path I'd choose, but I knew something had to change. The silence in the house felt heavier than ever, pressing in on me from all sides. I wondered how much longer I could bear it before I disappeared completely from their lives, and from my own. The next few days passed in a blur of routine, each one blending into the next. I woke, worked, ferried the kids, answered emails, cooked meals, and tried to convince myself that everything was fine. But the memory of that night, my family together, laughing without me, clung to me like a shadow. Every time I heard laughter from another room, I felt a jolt of anxiety, wondering if I was the punchline or simply forgotten. At breakfast, I watched my family move around the kitchen, each person orbiting the others without ever quite colliding. My wife scrolled through her phone, Sarah packed her bag, Ethan poured cereal. I tried to join their conversations, but my words landed with a dull thud, barely acknowledged. I found myself shrinking, speaking less, listening more, hoping to catch a thread that would pull me back into their circle. One evening, I suggested a movie night. "We haven't done one in a while," I said, keeping my tone light. "Maybe Friday." Sarah hesitated, glancing at her phone. "I think I have plans," she said. Ethan shrugged. "I might be out with friends." My wife offered a thin smile. "Let's see how the week goes." Their responses stung, but I nodded, pretending not to care. Work became my refuge. There, I could measure my worth in tasks completed, problems solved, emails answered. I stayed late, volunteered for extra projects, anything to avoid the silence that waited for me at home. My colleagues noticed my new intensity, mistaking it for ambition. I let them. One afternoon, my manager called me into his office. "You seem distracted lately," he said. "Everything all right at home?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Just the usual family stuff," I replied. He nodded, but his eyes lingered on me a moment longer than usual. Driving home that night, I replayed his words. Was I distracted? Or was I just tired of feeling invisible, tired of pretending that being left out didn't matter? I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car, engine off, watching the lights flicker in the living room. I could see shadows moving, hear faint bursts of laughter. I wondered if they'd notice if I didn't come in at all. Inside, the house was warm, filled with the smells of dinner. My wife and Sarah were at the table, deep in conversation. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. I hung up my coat and joined them, trying to slip into the flow of their talk. They paused, acknowledging me with polite smiles, then returned to their conversation. I listened, nodding at the right moments, but the gap between us felt wider than ever. After dinner, I found Ethan in his room, headphones on, eyes glued to his computer. I knocked, and he pulled off his headphones, annoyed. "What?" he asked. "Just wanted to check in," I said. "See how you're doing." He shrugged. "Fine." I waited, hoping he'd say more, but he turned back to his screen. I stood there, searching for the right words, something to bridge the distance. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here," I said quietly. He didn't look up. "Okay." I closed the door, feeling the weight of another failed attempt. I wondered if I was losing him, if I'd already lost him. I thought about all the times I'd been too busy, too tired, too distracted to really listen. Was this payback, or just the natural drift of growing up? Later that night, I sat with my wife in the living room, the TV flickering in the background. I tried to start a conversation, to ask about her day, her work, her worries. She answered in brief sentences, her attention divided. I wanted to tell her how I felt, about the night I found them at the table, about the ache of being left out, but the words stuck, heavy and awkward. I was afraid she'd dismiss it, tell me I was imagining things, that I was being desensitive. Instead, I sat in silence, watching the light play across her face, wondering when we'd last really talked. I missed her, missed the easy intimacy we once shared. I wondered if she missed me too, or if she was content with the new rhythm of our lives. As the week wore on, I found myself withdrawing, moving through the house like a ghost. I did my chores, paid the bills, kept the calendar running, but inside, I felt hollow, disconnected. I wondered how long I could keep pretending. How long before the cracks in our family became too wide to bridge. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered the house, stopping at the dining room table. I traced the grain of the wood, remembering birthday parties, holiday dinners, late-night talks. I wondered if those moments were gone for good, or if there was still a way back. I realized then that something had to change. I couldn't keep waiting for my family to notice me, to invite me back in. If I wanted to belong, I'd have to fight for it, even if it meant risking rejection. The thought terrified me, but it was better than fading away. I stood in the quiet house, determined to find my way back to them even if I had to do it alone. Friday arrived, and with it, a tension I couldn't ignore. All week, I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say, how I'd finally break the silence that had settled over our family. The fear of being brushed off gnawed at me, but the fear of disappearing was stronger. I left work early, not to escape, but to reclaim something I felt slipping away. At home, the house was quiet. I set the table for 4, each plate carefully placed. The old dishes my grandmother had passed down just as they had used them that night. I cooked a simple meal, nothing fancy, but enough to fill the rooms with familiar smells. With every small act, I tried to remind myself and them that I belonged here. As the family trickled in, their surprise was obvious. My wife paused in the doorway. Sarah hesitated at the stairs. Ethan hovered in the hall. I forced a smile, gesturing to the table. Let's have dinner together tonight. All of us. They exchanged glances. No one protested, but no one seemed eager either. We sat, the 4 of us. The silence thick at first. I served the food, my hands steady despite the tremor in my chest. I started small. Sarah, how was your week? She shrugged, mumbling about school, her friends, a test she'd barely passed. I nodded, listening, asking questions, pushing gently past her resistance. My wife joined in, offering encouragement, and soon, Sarah relaxed, her voice growing more animated. I turned to Ethan. How's the project you're working on? He looked surprised that I remembered, then offered a brief update. I pressed for details, not out of obligation, but genuine interest. He softened, sharing more than I expected, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in days. The conversation grew, awkward at first, then easier. My wife told a story from work. Sarah laughed. Ethan rolled his eyes but smiled. For a moment, it felt almost normal, like the family we used to be. But beneath the surface, I could feel the tension, the questions no one wanted to ask. When the plates were cleared, I knew it was time. My heart pounded as I spoke, voice steady but low. I need to say something, I began. Last week, when I came home and found you all having dinner without me, it hurt. I know everyone's busy and things change, but I felt left out, invisible. I don't want that to happen again. The words hung in the air heavier than I'd intended. My wife looked away. Sarah fidgeted. Ethan stared at his hands. I pressed on, afraid if I stopped I'd never start again. I'm not blaming anyone. I just want us to remember what we mean to each other. I want to be part of this family, not just someone who pays the bills or drives people around. I want to matter. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my wife reached across the table, her hand covering mine. I'm sorry, she said softly. I didn't realize how much you were hurting. I guess I've been wrapped up in my own world. Sarah's eyes were wide, uncertain. I thought you were busy, Dad. I didn't mean to leave you out. Ethan nodded, voice barely above a whisper. Me too. I just figured you'd join if you wanted. I felt a wave of relief and sadness, all at once. Relief that they'd heard me. Sadness for all the moments we'd missed. I should have said something sooner, I admitted. I was afraid of making things worse. My wife squeezed my hand. We can do better. All of us. We sat together, the four of us. Not quite healed but no longer drifting. The conversation turned lighter. But something had shifted. There was a new honesty in the room, a willingness to see each other, to listen, to try later. As I cleared the table, Ethan lingered behind. "Dad," he said quietly, "thanks for saying something. I guess I didn't realize how easy it is to forget someone's there." I smiled, ruffling his hair. "Me too, son. Me too." That night, as I lay in bed, I felt the ache of old wounds, but also the hope of something new. I knew we weren't fixed, not yet, but we'd taken a step. For the first time in a long while, I believed we could find our way back together. The days after our dinner were quieter, but not in the way they had been before. There was a new sense of possibility, a fragile hope that maybe things could be different. I moved through the house with less hesitation, no longer afraid of being invisible. Still, I knew that one conversation would not erase the distance that had grown between us. Repairing what had been broken would take more than a single night of honesty. It would require patience, humility, and the willingness to keep showing up. Even when it was uncomfortable, I started with small gestures. When Sarah mentioned a school project, I offered to help, not to take over, but simply to be present. With Ethan, I respected his space, but made a point of checking in, asking about his interests, listening without judgment. My wife and I began to carve out moments for ourselves, sometimes just sharing coffee in the morning, sometimes sitting in silence, but together. Each act was a thread, tentative but real, weaving us back toward one another. There were setbacks, old habits die hard, and sometimes the silence crept back in. Sometimes I caught myself retreating, slipping into the role of the outsider. But I remembered what I had learned, that reconciliation is not about proving who is right or wrong, but about choosing connection over pride, humility over defensiveness. For 156, when I felt myself pulling away, I tried to reach out instead. I apologized when I was short-tempered. I asked for forgiveness when I realized I'd missed an opportunity to listen. I let go of the need to be perfect and focused on being present. Gradually, the atmosphere in our home shifted. Laughter returned, softer at first, then stronger. We began to share more meals, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. Movie nights became a new ritual, sometimes with everyone, sometimes just 2 or 3 of us, but always with the sense that we belonged to each other. I learned to accept that our family would never be perfect, that there would always be moments of misunderstanding, but those didn't have to define us. One evening, as we sat around the table, Sarah told a story about her day, and Ethan chimed in with a joke. My wife reached for my hand under the table, a small gesture that spoke volumes. I looked at them, my family, and felt a quiet gratitude. We had not erased the pain of the past, but we had chosen to move forward. Together to 168, I realized then that belonging is not something you can demand or expect. It is something you build moment by moment, through honesty, forgiveness, and the willingness to try again. I had spent so long fearing that I would be left behind that I had forgotten the power. I had to reach out, to invite, to include. In choosing to speak up, to risk vulnerability, I had given my family the chance to do the same. There will always be days when old wounds ache, when misunderstandings threaten to pull us apart. But now, I trust that we have the tools to find our way back. We are stronger, not because we are flawless, but because we are willing to keep trying, to keep loving. Even when it is hard. 158. As I cleared the dishes that night, I caught my own reflection in the window. I saw not the outsider I once feared I'd become, but a father, a partner, a man who had chosen to stay. And in that quiet moment, I knew I was exactly where I belonged.